So anyway, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Kern. Thank you very much.
Do I need a microphone?
No.
I'll try to put this question. Can everybody hear me? No. Okay, so we'll do it without the microphone. That's better for me as well. A couple of months ago, I did a presentation on searching with Sitecore 7, and I had some questions from you guys around, I guess, configuration issues, and I cited that and said, oh, but I'll come back and present in a couple of months. And I thought you'd all forget about it and we could move on. Well, I didn't have as many people come forward to do user group presentations, so it fell on me to fill this space here. So I guess if any of you have something that you want to talk about, please get in touch, and you could be here doing this thing, being offered to speak in a microphone and have slides and perhaps some demos and fun. So I really like that. Is that someone volunteering over there? No, I'm just kidding. So I'm also hoping, I know we have some of the newly awarded MVPs in the room tonight. I'll hope that they would do some presentations as well, and perhaps we can even move up to doing 3 presentations per event. Who would like that? Okay, or we can stick with 2. We'll see how we go on that. So, I'll start out with a question, and feel free to sort of jump in if you have some valuable insight on this question. What is Sitecore 7 Search? Have any of you started using Sitecore 7 and the new aspects of it?
Yes.
Yeah, there's one guy down here. Yeah, a couple of guys. So, for those of you who haven't really jumped in there yet, Sitecore 7 has, as I see it, 3 things that it brings to the table. It brings in a bucket, item bucket search UI. It brings in a new content search API and search providers with Lucene and Solr out of the box. And of course, prior to Sitecore 7, we did have very good support for Lucene. I guess the APIs were could be improved upon, and we have done that. And of course, we didn't have any search interfaces in the CMS in prior to 7, so we put that in there. And all of these new features, of course, comes with a whole host of different things that we can change and configure the behaviors. And that was what I was hoping to cover today. So I'll not be talking about how to use the content search API and the link queries, because I've already done that a couple of months ago, and I'm sure you can find that on YouTube. But I will talk about configuration and different aspects of search in Sitecore 7. So just a quick reminder, configuration should ideally not be done directly in web config, and the Sitecore 7 team has of course adhered to that rule, and all the configuration files that I'm talking about today lives in the app-config include folder. So just to save me saying that a couple of times. A quick refresher for those of you who's forgotten about the bucket UI. So I've just on this slide tried to point out some of the aspects of it. I'll happily go into details if you... Does anyone want me to go into a little bit more detail about what these different UI things are and what they do? Well, basically, I guess we know that item buckets is a cheat. It's a way of hiding the hierarchy away. The hierarchy still exists in the database, but the editors won't see it anymore. But no questions on that. We'll quickly move on. there are some aspects of this that can be configured, and of course you can customize all the pipelines, and you can change the commands and hook into the events that are being generated by the Bucket UI. But I think personally I haven't found a need for that yet. I'm sure I'll stumble upon it at some point, but I think it's important that we realize it's there. There are those some settings that I think I'll just wanted to highlight. So of course the first one here is the bucket folder path, and as I said, the hierarchy of items in an item bucket does not go away in reality. It's just hidden away from the editors, and the bucket folder path is a way where you can a setting where you can change how that path looks. So by default it's composed of sort of year, month, date down to second, I think. You can go in there and adjust that in that setting. And the second one there, force client language in search. Have we got any bidders? What do you think this will do? I'll go with Anthony. He'll guess. What is your guess that this will do?
I believe that when you have the context language set in the content editor and you do a search, it returns results first in the language that you're set.
So you're absolutely wrong in many ways. more than one, actually. I too believe that as I was switching the language, it would sort of pre-filter my query down to this language. It will filter your query, but to the context language of the Sitecore interface. So
that's what I just said. Context language that you're logged in as. So in the login screen, when they say DE as your login, you then search.
Yeah, it doesn't sort it. Okay. My story was better. People laughed. Let's move on. So, yes, and I put here in parens bucket configuration dot. That's just because I abbreviated the setting names. Let's move on. Is it all right with you guys that I keep sitting here because I haven't got a clicker, so and I haven't got anywhere to stand either, so. There's some additional configuration that lives outside the config files for item buckets, I can't give you the sort of rule for when things are in a config file and when they're configured as items. Some settings, for instance, the sort of behavior for how it shows up in search results, or how the search results are opened, are configured in here. That's actually one that I would probably change on any project. So instead of it opening in a tab, my personal preference would be it opening in a new window. So I don't know if you have noticed how when you open search result, they sort of open a content editor within the content editor. Looks a little bit confusing, because it is a bit confusing. So there are other things you can change in here. For instance, you can change how the faceting set up for, not for content search, but for the item bucket UI is set up. There's stuff around tag repositories and filter queries. So if you want to expand on the sort of behavior of the search interface in the Sitecore client, this is where to go. And now to something completely different. Something that I think we'll all perhaps get much more use of. Things that are not necessarily related to item buckets, I've sort of left that behind now, but to the actual search mechanisms and search providers. So when you install Sitecore, it is pre-configured to have Lucene as its index provider. It has already set up indexes for core, master and web. So you could be rolling sort of out of the box. You don't have to do any special configuration. if you want to do configuration, I've put a little list of config files, and I think one aspect to keep in mind here is that one of them is a shared configuration, so the second one from the top. The stuff that is defined in the default index configuration applies to all the indexes. This is to avoid repetition of configuration. And I guess the last three in the list here are sort of specific for each of the indexes. So if you were to, if you wanted your own index of some sort, you could, I guess, copy one of these files and modify it to suit your needs. I think it's important just to remember about Lucene that these are indexes that live on the local Sitecore instance. So if you have a multi-instance setup, then you need to maintain indexes on all of them, which of course is a sort of a shared overhead for the same mechanism. It's not on most installations this is not a big problem, and absolutely fine. And we'll talk about what you can do for scaling, what your options are a little bit later. In the configuration files, you will come across some different aspects, and I'm not expecting to be able to do sort of a comprehensive guide tonight, but I'll pick out some of the highlights that I've sort of found the most interesting and challenging to understand in depth, and try and talk about those. And by any means, feel free to ask some questions or write them down as we go along. So the first thing that you immediately notice is different from the way that Sitecore 6.6 handles indexing to the way it's done in Sitecore 7. Is that Sitecore 7 introduces the possibility for having different index strategies. In previous versions of Sitecore, we were locked into one index update strategy, and that gave some limitations. But now we have a set of index update strategies out of the box that you can choose between, or you can create your own if they don't fit your needs exactly. This is specifically it's very handy when you have, for instance, sites where the throughput is very high. You may want to change the way that the update strategy works. Also, I put on here commit policy because I didn't understand what it did when I first looked at it and where it fitted in. So I've done a little diagram down at the bottom there, full of Sitecore icons, and I guess a commit policy. What did I put here? Controls when information commits to index. Okay, I'll try and explain it. When you have content, based on your index strategy, it will at interval be selected, it will be crawled for indexing. And the crawling is of course done by the designed by the provider you're using. Then each of the providers, so both the Solr and the Lucene, use something called commit policies to decide when actually to write this back. So our default for Lucene is that it will just be on a timer. So it's not many seconds in between that commit policy will allow stuff to be actually persisted into the Lucene index. So the index provider will basically keep some documents in memory until the commit policy allows us to go through. And then it ends up persisted in the index as it says on the slide. The default configuration for Webmaster and Core is that they each have their own strategy. And I guess for the master, we want our indexes to be very much up to date. So every time someone does a save or a delete or a move or any other action that would trigger a index update, it's done there and then. in the web database, we don't have the same sort of maneuvering of content. We can wait for a publish to finish, and then we can update the index. And then in the core, it's just done once in a while. So it sits on an interval instead. Anything new for you, or is this old news? Okay, I'll move on then. I'll take that as a perhaps. The next thing I just wanted to touch upon was something called analyzers. We did have analyzers in previous versions of Sitecore, and I guess it's a concept that comes out of Lucene. I think most search mechanisms, indexing mechanisms, uses analyzers in some guise. For the Lucene setup, when you're using the Lucene search provider, you can use a Lucene analyzer, so you don't have to write your own for everything. You can actually look in the backlog of Lucene.net and see what sort of stuff that they have. To explain what an analyzer does, it takes in raw data, so for instance the data in your field, and then it will mangle it. So put it in a form that is I guess helpful for when you want to search it out again. So it does some things. It can change. So for instance, it can lowercase stuff. If you're using an analyzer, that will do that. It can remove stop words. In my second example here with standard analyzer, you can see one of the words are being removed from the raw data. And then it will tokenize the string. So I'll put little brackets on to sort of symbolize the tokenization. And you can see there's a big difference in how, for instance, a standard analyzer and a white space analyzer will change and persist the data in the index. Can anyone foresee any problems with, for instance, using the standard analyzer for everything? Yeah, that could be something if you're expecting, for instance, let's say in this example, the word built in, for instance, the standard analyzer will chop that into 2 words and then get rid of one of them. So that could be if you have a keyword that is built in. Any other things?
When you want to display it on the site later.
That's right. That could be a problem, but there is a way of handling that. There's another case that I was challenged upon when I did my searching. It was specifically around.
It's actually the stopwords that you mentioned. Actually includes the default stopwords, about 25 stopwords.
Yeah, so
But you can't use any queries, so it doesn't serve any search. So you have to inherit from the standard analyzer.
Yes, if you want to. Yeah, that could be a problem as well. The specific problem that I had in mind, and that was me sitting here, so I'll talk about that, is sorting. If we do standard analyzer on title and want to sort alphabetically on title, we will get some unexpected results. So in that case, you may want to both have the title analyzed and untokenized or unanalyzed. There's a little bit of a battle of the words there. In the configuration, you'll see the wording tokenized, and you can that is the same as analyzed. So I think that's just a bit of wording there that don't let that confuse you. Does the same thing. By default, Sitecore uses a per field analyzer, which means that you can apply different analyzers to different fields. This is very handy. And if you don't specify a specific analyzer for a field, it'll just fall back on the standard analyzer. So, oh, and just one note here, the white space analyzer that I looked at here is actually a Lucene net one. It's not one that comes with the Sitecore content search. And right, I think I will just show you how a little example of this. So just do like this and like that, and like that. Can everyone see this, or do I need to use the scroll wheel and all that jazz? Okay, so what am I looking for? I can't see it now. Sorry. Home item. There we are. So for this, I created a little example. You can see where I've been doing my screenshots and everything. I put in some new fields on the sample item, and just gave them some names so we could see what they would do to them. Using the standard analyzer, using the lowercase keyword thing, and the white space analyzer. And also, what happens if you have a space in the name? That was another question that I had last time. So we'll just explore when this item here is indexed, what will that look like? And I'll use a tool that you should all get comfortable with, even though it looks like a dog. Something called Luke. Have you got experience? Anyone has got experience with using Luke? Yeah, there's a couple of hands over there. So Luke is basically a way of exploring your indexes. So tips around using Luke, open in read-only mode. So that's usually helpful. I've opened one of the indexes for my Sitecore 7.1 user group, and I've opened the master index. On the overview screen, I can actually see the available fields that have been put in the index, and I'm just going to go through this list very quickly and see if I can find. I can't see what's going on here. There we are. Find the. What are you whispering about? Oh, sorry. Be quiet.
Sorry.
Here they are. If you look at the UG lowercase, you can see that there are some different terms coming in there, and common for them are that the text here is the token. So you can see everything is in lowercase, and not much has been done with the different things here. If we look at something like the UG standard instead, we can see that all of a sudden the string has been chopped up into many little things, so it's been tokenized. Does that make sense? And of course we can also, if you look at the white space one, does something completely different, including the HTML, which is I guess not very helpful. Okay. Back to the slides, perhaps. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So, our last little point on analyzers. When you have the raw data, it is not only when you index stuff it goes through the analyzers. Of course, when you query, things go the same way. So if we ask for, if we write something in lowercase, we should also ask for it in lowercase. So just a little note on how that works. Oh, by the way, did anyone on the first slide notice what was on the picture? Here's a index cabinet. Have you ever used one of those? Are you from that generation?
I wasn't born yet.
No. Well, it's part of the story. I've tried to draw you into my presentation with some visual aids. There's the next one. So in configuration, and this is specifically in the sort of default index configuration for Lucene, we can add fields by name. That's very handy, because then we can also query them by name. Here you can see the example for the UG white space. So this field name here, it refers to the name I've used in Sitecore. So there's a field Sitecore, and this is also the name that will be used in Lucene. In Sitecore, we allow spaces and crazy stuff in names, not so in Lucene. So there will be some translation of that. If you have names with spaces in, they'll be put in as underscores. So just bear that in mind, that it's not, it can't do necessarily a one-to-one match there. Steve, you said something about you know, the actual raw data. If it's tokenized, how can we display it again? By default, Sitecore does not store much of the raw data, but you can actually store the raw field data in your index as well. And there are good reasons for doing it. It's not just to bloat your index full of data, but that is a side effect. But if you have the actual text there, then you don't necessarily need to look up the Sitecore item on the other side when you're bringing back search results, for instance. So it may be some of the, for instance, in a search result, you don't necessarily need to enable page editing, so you could perhaps shortcut some of that looking up items in the database if you're already looking in the index. So if you want to be able to read out the value of the field when you're searching for it, then you need storage type equals yes. Then we have the index type, and we talked a little bit about things going through the analyzer. Tokenized, analyzed, call it what you will. Well, actually, don't call it what you will. Call it tokenized. That's what works. So, yes. You can also specify that it shouldn't tokenize or analyze, which of course will just send the raw data through. Then we have some things about boosting here. So here it says 1F. I guess that's just that means 1, and this is a scale that will adjust your boost. This is very much down to the way boost is handled. Depends on which provider you're using. Luckily, both Solr and Lucene is based on Lucene. Lucene is Lucene. Solr is based on Lucene. So they handled it in the same way. You could imagine if you created a provider for some other search mechanisms out there. Can I have some ideas? They've already done one, so you don't have to do that. But it's a good example. They may handle boosting differently. So it's down to how the actual internals of the search mechanism works. Then we have some information about type. Basically, what is the .NET type? And the settings type is irrelevant because you always use the same thing. And then sneakily in here, I've specified that it should use the white space analyzer. So that is an example of adding a field by name. There are other ways of specifying fields. Here we have computed and virtual fields. I guess I'll just let you read the slide for a second, and then I'll explain.
What happens in the previous slide if you change the field name?
What do you mean, what happens?
Isn't it better to refer those fields by ID configuration?
Possibly, but no. I don't think that would work well.
What was the question?
Would it be better to use IDs as the field name? I think as they're going to be the names in the index as well. That I can see your point. I hadn't considered, and all the examples that are available to us. Hmm? Yeah. Perhaps. I'll come back and do a user presentation on that in a couple of months. Let me think it over, and then we'll talk about it at the end. We'll get everyone's opinion, and then we'll make up our mind. So, computed fields are used to, I guess, generate made-up data or use some sort of logic to compute values that you don't already have. So I'll put a little code example here of overriding the compute field value. You get in an indexable that you can, with a little bit of casting, you can turn it into an item, and then you can work on that item. Here I've got an imaginary my index value computation method that could bring back something. So could anyone give me an example of where this would be handy?
Triple stage with in the web tags that add the name of the reference item rather than ID.
Yeah, that's right. Let's say that you have an ID, but in reality you'd rather index a name. If you wanted to, for instance, to sort alphabetically on that name or something. There are some examples online done by the Sitecore 7 team where they compute date fields. So, for instance, they have a full date and then they calculate the year and the month and the day separately. And we have a similar, you can say this is sort of a little bit like using analyzers. So it's something that happens on the way data going into the index, you mash it up and then do something with it before it goes through the analyzer and then into the index. Then we have a virtual field processor. And I'm very sad that they didn't just call it a query transform thing, because that's what it's doing. It's I find it a bit the naming confusing, but it basically it receives a query and then it does some work on that. So you could, for instance, say my example here is that I'm asking for the field updated, which would be my virtual field, and then I'm saying where it matches yesterday. Now, none of the things in my index will contain the word yesterday, so I need to do something with it. So in this case, I'll perhaps create first of all, I'll work out what was yesterday's date, and then I'll do a compound query on the sort of year, month, and day. So that would be a way of looking at something from yesterday. And again, this is not an example that I made up. There's a good example on Sitecore.net from the Sitecore 7 team. Then I have a slide imaginary called Other Configuration. Just some bits and bobs that I thought would be nifty. You can also add fields by type, and actually that is already in the configuration. I would say this is mainly if you are adding your own field types, then this would apply. Also notice that all the stuff here that's added by type, which is a sort of a text type, will end up in a field in the index called _content. That's why we can, for instance, in item buckets, we can just search for random text strings without specifying which field we expect them to be in, because it's all concatenated into the _content. Then we have something called custom fields, and I was having a discussion with one of the devs from the Sitecore 7 team today, because I had some questions around it. I had some things I didn't understand, and he said that this may be obsoleted because there is a big overlap with what you can do with computed fields. And if any of you have worked with the advanced database crawler, add custom field may sound familiar.
That's the search config, yeah?
The project that Alex did, yeah.
It's quite similar.
Yes, and Alex was on the 17, so they've taken a lot of his stuff and put it in here. This was one of the things that they perhaps should have refactored before But anyway, I would say if you think of using a custom field, perhaps think of using a computed field. This is totally a rumor. It may or may not happen. And apologies to Stephen for naming him here. Oh, I haven't said his name before, had I? Oh. Okay. So there are also mechanisms for including and excluding items based on their template. And there's a lot of configuration there already. So you can, if you have specific templates that you don't want to go in the index, you can exclude them. And we have similar mechanisms for excluding fields. That is if the index all fields setting is set to true. Okay, well that was a few aspects around configuring Lucene. And I did briefly touch upon the fact that Lucene is handled on each instance, so they're maintained on each instance. So if you have, let's say, 5 indexes, then that will be multiplied by the number of instances that you're running. There is some solutions for that, and I guess Solr will come to mind. I'm sure that many of you have already used Solr on other projects and know sort of what it does. Basically, it is a very advanced indexer searcher that lives on a HTTP endpoint. And we can, with the Solr provider, use one of those. And I hope to create some debate here. I'll put up some pros and cons, and you can agree or disagree. I guess I'll see it as a plus that you can centralize your indexing and querying. And you can use the tried and tested Solr zookeeper clustering facilities if you need your search machinery to perform better, or if you need more power, I guess. Then on the downside, I bluntly put that it's Java based. I did some Java around 10 years ago, and I don't know, I thought people just stopped doing it, but apparently not. I'm trying to provoke a reaction here. I'm hoping that someone will jump in and be the champion of Java. Come on. Okay. Well, I will actually say that I think there's a lot of great Java projects out there, and Lucene is natively a Java project, and Solr is a Java project. My point here is that I work on a Microsoft.NET stack, and if I also have to maintain all sorts of Java things, that's just more things that can go wrong for me, so more complexity. So you have to weigh it up. Does the benefits outweigh the downsides? Also, I put it as I guess a downside that a lot of the field mapping and manipulation is done on the Solr server, so you take that configuration, some of that, not all of it, but some of the configuration is taken out of Sitecore and put into Solr instead. So, for instance, the configuration of analyzers is detached from the rest of your index configuration, as an example. Okay. Cool. Any comments on that? Have you noticed how we're moving closer to this index cabinet? It's now a good close-up. Soon we'll jump into the drawer there. Just going to brace myself before I go to the next slide. There we are. We all waited for that one. A demo. So I will show you how to get started with Solr. I found it was a lot easier when I did it the sort of third time around. There's not many steps involved, but this is sort of my what I boiled down from the documentation and what sort of worked for me. So if we follow these steps, we should be able to change my Sitecore instance from using Lucene to using Solr. Now, who wants to see that? Hey! Okay. Well, if you're not interested, there we go. I'll keep that here. So, first of all, I'll do like this, and we need to download Solr, and I'll just do this, and great if I could see where the cursor is. There we are. On my desktop, I have downloaded Solr, and when you download Solr, you get just a zip file. As you can see, I tried this earlier today, and I will just unzip this to here. In the documentation, it says to use Solr 4.1. I've had okay results using a later version, so I assume that's okay. So this is this Java beast that we have to get to know, and there is an example already, an example setup, and that's the one we'll go with. In here, I hope that you can follow, otherwise tell me to slow down or whatever. We have Solr configurations, and you can see there's a couple of different ones. There's some example ones up here. I'm just going to use the one called Solr. It has a configuration file, and I'm not going to touch it, but I'm going to just change the name of this collection here. So Solr has the concept of cores, and I'm going to change this one to be my item buckets core. The reason I've changed it to using the item buckets name is basically because so I don't have to change the configuration from Sitecore. Of course, you can use whatever name you want. You can configure it from either end. I'm just going to go into the core properties and open it on the other screen. You can see this is a very interesting file saying name equals item buckets. There we are. Save that, and what's your thing here? There we go. Our next step. Next step would be to use something called the Solr schema generator. So if we look in the configuration here, we can see that we have a schema file, and that's an important difference between Lucene and Solr. It's this concept of having a schema, you know, like a database schema. So there is some information about the structure of the indexes. Where in Lucene it's freeform, you know, you don't have to specify anything in advance. Right, we'll just go back here. And again, I'm doing a little cheat here. This is not like a production step that you would have to do. This is just me being a little bit lazy. I'm going to say add network service here. And so you can do whatever you want. There we are. This is the height of security. Don't do this at home, kids. I'm a professional. So, back to Sitecore, and I'm just going to go into the desktop mode. And if we go to the control panel, there's a new thing here for Sitecore 7 called indexing, and it has the facility to generate a Solr schema. So if I just say next, you can see it wants me to put in a path for the Solr schema, and I'll just do like this, copy away, and then we should also, I tell it where to find the existing Solr schema, and then this little utility will go in and change it to be Sitecore friendly. So I'm just going to say Solr schema 2. and then I'll say generate. So if I didn't do this security mumbo jumbo did just before, it would just say can't find the file. But there we are. So back into the other window. There we are. You can now see there's a second schema generated just now. We could just do a quick compare, and I'll just move the thing in here. So you can see there's lots of stuff up at the top here that's different. I'll just call out the stuff that is the main difference. So look at these here, the dynamic fields. So as I said, Sitecore comes from a sort of a world where indexing is schemaless, and the only sort of real tool in Solr is to use dynamic fields. Otherwise, we would have to generate a new schema every time we added a new field name. Boring. So let's not do that. I just want to show you that. And notice how it's put on with like a suffix, so it will use the field. Anything that comes into Solr with a suffix of _t, _en will be picked up by this dynamic field. You can still specify your own field names, as you can see up here. It's possible to specify field name in Solr to this game. Jason looks very concerned.
No, he's just being weird.
Okay, well, don't be weird. Okay, so let's we'll keep a backup of this one here. Could still go wrong. And then we have a schema in place that is now all Sitecore-ified. I guess I should perhaps also start Solr. That will perhaps help. And starting Solr can be done like this. I'll just go back one. So just going to move in another window. Sorry about that. Can you see what I'm doing here? If you can't, then that's probably good. So I'm just going to navigate to the Solr folder and then use all my Java expertise to do like this. Start jar. So this instructs Java to start Solr. You don't have to do it like this. The reason I do it like this is so that I can see this text running. This, of course, will have an impact on your sort of speed of indexing and stuff because it's logging a lot to the console. But as I said, this is a sort of quick start. The Solr boys have loads of stuff on the web on how to do this more efficiently. So let's just let's keep it here for now. This one will sort of move along every time there's any activity on Solr. And localhost. This here is the admin interface for Solr. And you can see that this instance was started less than a minute ago. So it's probably the one we just configured. And we have something called item buckets here. No documents in there, so we need to do some more work. Next step would be to jump back to Sitecore, or to the Sitecore configuration, and we have that here. And I need to, I guess first of all I need to get rid of my configuration for Lucene. So that's all the ones called that are prefixed with Sitecore content search Lucene. I'm just going to change their name here, and then about that. So now there are no indexes running for this Sitecore instance, or any instances, I forget about that. Anyway. Next step is to download the Sitecore Solr support package from SDN. it is on the same page as where you download a installer or zip of Sitecore instance. So there's a little link on that page where you can download the Solr support package. It contains a couple of things, and I've cheated. I've already done this, so there's no point in doing it again. It contains a Solr index configuration, which you'll use instead of the one that we have for Lucene. And it also contains a couple of binaries, and I've just put all of them in here, and you will recognize them because they have the name Solr in there. So here you can see those are stuff for the Solr provider. One thing to keep in mind is that the Solr provider requires a dependency injection framework, and there are some different options for you that comes out of the box. Artifact, Castle, Ninject, Structure Map, and Unity. I've, for this example, just used Castle. One thing to be aware of is sort of the versioning. These pre-baked binaries are, of course, they're baked for a specific version of Sitecore, and also a specific version of whichever IOC framework here. So just keep that in mind. Actually, for this setup, I've had to do some assembly mappings because I didn't have the right version of Castle installed for this project. So just keep that in mind. There may be a little bit of a bumpy road for you. Just
It's very annoying.
yeah, I concur. It is an annoyance, and I'm sure that the search team would like to improve on that.
Excellent. It's good to hear.
Yeah. So next step would be to configure which IOC container I want to use, and I have already copied in my my Castle stuff. It's up at the top here. Just checking. Yeah. So I can happily move on, and to enable this, I need to do one change. I need to change the. Let's just do like this. I open. Not quite sure what's opening now. It's coming. It's coming. Oh dear. Open with 2012. That's better. So if you have a look here, you can see that the webconfig inherits, so the global ASAX inherits from Sitecore web application. It needs to inherit from something different, and that something different is called. I've got it baked into my file here. Oh, prepared. Do like that, and reload. So you can see the Solr search provider has a Castle Winter integration Winter application. So we need that in place, otherwise it's not going to work for you. Okay. Where did the slides go? I just need to check that we've done everything. Last point, rebuild indexes. Are we already done? Let's see if this worked. Maybe. So, this is also new for Sitecore 7, the index manager here. It's a little bit more advanced than what we used to have. And we'll just wait for it to spin up. Hopefully it's not going to crash. And
Welcome to 7.1.
yeah. Sorry, I'll just move this over to my big screen. There we are. So basically, Actually, can it be there? Okay. So
always work on a 24-inch monitor.
I know. We'll get there. Can you see that I can select the indexes I want to rebuild, and then with a little bit of moving around on multiple scroll bars, I can rebuild. And we can see some stats on the different indexes here. So we'll re-index, and I have now approximately 136 seconds to ask for another Diet Coke. No. Okay. Can you see up here in the corner something that's ticking away? See, look at that. We know something's working. This is the matrix, I guess. I just, when my wife asks what I do for a living, I point to this. Oh, thank you, sir. That's very kind of you.
You didn't pour in it before you can.
Yes, there's a full service agency.
Well trained.
Would you like ice, sir?
So, no, go away, I'm done. So, Rich. Thank you. There we are. The indexing is done, and I'm just having to check here. I beat my previous record of 136. It's now 127 seconds. And I've processed all the items in the different databases. And if we go back to our item buckets core, we can then just ask it to refresh, perhaps. Go on. Now we can see that we have put 41,000 documents into the core. And we can start looking at those. There's even a little sort of query interface, so we could, for instance, say something where there's a title of that contains sample. That may work, or it may not. We'll try. So no title field, or we'll just search for title sample. So I did find a lot of documents that match that. It found some in the, at least one in the master index, and you can see there's loads of information here. This is the sort of information that will be communicated to the Solr index provider. You'll, in your Sitecore project, never really be exposed to this. It's all abstracted away, as we talked about in my previous presentation around the search API. So, I'm just going to go back to my slides. Okay. Right. I put a little index card for you here with some tips. You can use Luke to inspect the local Lucene indexes. Actually, you can use Solr admin interface in the same sort of way to explore your indexes when you're running Solr. There are some log files that are enabled by default that gives you very good information about when you create a query, what is actually what is it sending to Lucene or to Solr. So you can get some information on searching and crawling. They're found in the same place as the normal logs for Sitecore. We did touch upon this previously, using a storage type if you wanted to have the raw data available. Of course, the disadvantage was that your indexes will take up more space on the disk. And then this subtlety around Lucene being schemaless and Solr not being schemaless. There's a good blog post on that from the Sitecore 7 development team. I put the link in here, not that I expect any of you to be able to remember it, but the slides will of course be available. Oh, also yes. Think about the impact of using an analyzer for the different fields. What is it that you're hoping to do with the fields when you put them in the index? And only index the things you need. So if you don't need to bring back the raw value of all of the stuff you're putting in the index, don't set the storage type to yes, set it to no. And filter out templates that you don't want to search on. So get rid of the stuff that you don't need to get in there. Of course, the reason we're using indexing and search in the first place is for speed. So where to next? I suggest that you have a look at SDN. And there's a whole section for the Sitecore 7 documentation. Some of the documents are still valid from 6.6, so if you find them in the Sitecore 7 section of SDN, that's still fine. The two documents I've put on here is the search and indexing guide and the search CMS scaling guide. And those are the two main documents that I've used to sort of support my research here. Also, there are some great Google Hangout videos available on YouTube, where you can see our developers talk about the different features in Sitecore 7. There was a particularly good one around Halloween time, where they were all dressed up. And also have a look at Sitecore.net in the community section. The Sitecore 7 team have their own little section full of useful blog posts there. And of course you can come and visit us and take the Sitecore 7 developer upgrade course if you haven't already done so. And of course you can contact me in Sitecore Technical Consulting, and I can help you out with your questions. I can also help you out with your questions now.
Question here.
Yes?
Can we potentially index properties of sublayer using analyzer or some other method?
Yes, I'll probably reach for a computed field to fish stuff out of the, because they're stored on the item. So yeah, that should be possible.
So should we put in this computed field logic? Should we put a custom parser for these properties? Because it's basically some kind of custom XML in there.
Yeah. I mean, Sitecore has mechanisms for parsing this. It may be that we can find a way in the API to leverage that, depending on exactly what information you want to pull out.
Is it legal at all to reverse engineer Sitecore library?
It is.
No, they are obfuscated some of them. Is it legal to do that?
I cannot comment on legal issues, but I will give you the guidance that is published on the partner network. It is fine for developers to use Reflector on Sitecore's binaries if it's for research purposes.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Yes, that is absolutely fine.
So go decompile the entire kernel.
Yeah, and sell it to somebody else.
No, you don't have to be a genius to figure out that it's of course Sitecore's property. Even the clients, they buy a license to use our software. It's ours. Sorry about that, guys. But that's something to keep in mind. So there was one more question here. Yeah.
In the configuration files for Solr,
Yeah.
you can specify one core to point to. What if you want to specify have two separate indexes on one server? So, for example, you might want one index for just for querying for performance benefits, but you still only have a single instance of Sitecore.
I'll have you to owe you an answer on that one. It's a very good question. Do you have the answer?
No.
Okay.
What's that, to have multiple indexes?
And also have multiple cores potentially on different Solr servers.
On on a single instance of something.
On a single instance of Sitecore. Just repeat the question again.
So if you have multiple instances of Sitecore,
Multiple instances of Sitecore, yeah, okay.
then that's fine because you have separate configuration files.
Yeah.
So you can point a delivery instance at a different index than say the authoring. If you've got a single instance, then you've got a single set of configuration files. So you can't differentiate between the index that might say run taxing operations like re-indexing and may affect performance of search queries.
I'm not sure about how it translates to Solr, but we've seen where you've got the default master index configuration, then you've got web.configuration master dot. You can just create another one with your own index, strip out all the fields that you don't want, and you can build a very lightweight index off of a particular trial.
Yeah, I mean, I was more looking at Solr side.
But I'm sure the same translates to Solr. I don't think there's any.
There's only one configuration file for Solr.
You can't point there more than one.
I think there is some mileage in your question, and I will take it back to the team and work out if we have an answer for that. I know that they have done work for sharding with Machine, and they may have translated some of that work. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Hi. I think I have a slightly related question to the previous one. You mentioned about attacking Zookeeper and centralizing Solr indexes. I'd just like to know if there are any special integration points between Sitecore where you can integrate with Zookeeper clusters. To go into a bit more details, let's say we have like a clustered environment of Solr, and I think the way the Sitecore configures the endpoint is you have one configuration where you can point to the Solr instance. But let's say in a clustered environment, we don't really want to have a single point of failure. So I don't want to point it to one single node, but rather to the cluster itself. So in the Java world, I think they have a thing called the smart client, like SolarJ. I'm not familiar with that, but I've heard that. I would like to know if there are any special integration with Sitecore that provides single functionality.
Oh, you're doing all the hard questions tonight, aren't you? I haven't got an answer for that. I actually think they covered it in one of the Google Hangouts as well. So, first port of call would be the YouTube link, and I'll post on the LinkedIn forum if I can find an answer.
Just a general question for Solr and Steve. Is there a plan from Sitecore to support extra features? For example, I know it's been a big selling point that Solr is a powerful search engine because it's got more features, spatial search, highlighting, more like this. But obviously that's not supported by Sitecore provider. Unfortunately, clients are becoming a little bit misled by that situation. At the moment, we can't provide it out of the box.
Who's misleading the client?
Huh?
Who's misleading the client?
Sitecore.
We are.
Yes, because you're saying you can use Solr, which is more powerful, and this is what it is, which Solr can do. But the provider is not supported by out of the box. So it means it costs extra to develop it.
I will. So it's true that there are some features that are not currently supported, and it is very much on the top of our wish list of things that we want to put in there. I can't give you a schedule for it. Some of the problems we can work around. Some of them are a bit more difficult. For instance, the highlighting.
Yeah, I mean, when a customer is working with us, when they ask about Solr search, if we ever go into a meeting with a customer, a partner, or a client, the entire Sitecore UK team has slides that will outline exactly which features. It's quite well publicised on John West's documentation and the relevant Sitecore blogs. It's quite well documented in the sort of Solr index. So I can appreciate why Sitecore does say Solr is more powerful, but the message from us is more powerful from a scale perspective as opposed to a functionality perspective. So I can definitely hear what you're saying about how you've been misled. There are no plans right now in the engineering cycle for any of the major features to be supported, but it's definitely on the top of the engineering wish list. So
But if you do have a situation like that, I'm here to support you, and I'll absolutely come in and make sure the client is 100% clear from both a commercial and a technical perspective. So if you ever get into those situations, just give us a call and somebody will make sure that any fires are covered.
Oh, and also, I'm visiting you guys on Friday, so book in some time and I'll bring my flak jacket. Now, let's see if, how much of the ground that we can cover with working around, because there are some limitations. And if you come up with some good solutions, you'll be next, sitting here. Good. Shall we do a quick break and have some drinks and wake up? Good. Thank you. Thank you.